Star Trek, Nemesis ending, and why it killed TNG movies explained. When Star Trek, Nemesis hit theaters in 2002, it carried the weight of expectations heavier than a warp core overload. After nearly a decade of the next generation TNG films, fans were hoping for the return of the ensemble that had redefined Starfleet optimism and philosophy. Instead, what they got was an ending so starkly different from the hopeful tone of previous TNG movies that it effectively killed the possibility of future films, at least in the way fans had envisioned them. To understand why, we need to dissect the movie's ending, its thematic choices, and the implications for the future of the TNG crew. At the core of Nemesis is a confrontation that feels both intimate and apocalyptic. Captain Jean-Luc Picard versus his clone, Shenzhen. The movie's climax hinges on the death of a beloved character and the moral ambiguity of Picard's final choices. Shenzhen, with a copy of Picard's DNA, represents what Picard could have become under darker circumstances. Their duel, both ideological and physical, pushes Picard to face the consequences of empathy and restraint. But the fallout, literally and figuratively, is grim. The Enterprise suffers major damage, the villain dies, but more importantly, the emotional resonance of the ending is one of loss, not triumph. The final moments of the movie are this tone. Picard returns to a ship filled with grief and survivors, carrying the weight of those who didn't make it. Unlike previous TNG films, such as First Contact, where victory is hard-earned but leaves room for hope, Nemesis closes on a note of irreversible cost. This is not the TNG we knew, the optimistic Starfleet that solved problems with diplomacy and intellect, who could find a silver lining in interstellar crises. Instead, Nemesis presents a universe that is darker, more tragic, and painfully finite. Why did this ending essentially kill the TNG movie franchise? The answer lies in both audience expectations and Hollywood economics. By the early 2000s, TNG movies had relied on a formula: high-stakes plots, moral quandaries, and the comfort of familiar faces. Fans expected a continuation of the TV series' ethos: exploration, camaraderie, and ultimately, hope. Nemesis, with its somber conclusion, clashed with this established brand. It wasn't just another adventure. It was a meditation on mortality, legacy, and the consequences of violence, hardly the feel-good cinematic spectacle the studio hoped for. Moreover, the death of a key character removed a critical narrative anchor. In previous TNG films, the ensemble cast functioned as a cohesive unit, each member contributing to the emotional and tactical resolution of the story. By introducing Shenzhen and centering the plot around Picard's personal confrontation, Nemesis shifted the focus away from the team. The ripple effect was clear. Without the full ensemble dynamic operating in a familiar framework, future films would have to rebuild emotional stakes from scratch, a risky proposition for studios already seeing diminishing box office returns. And then there's timing. By 2002, the sci-fi cinematic landscape had evolved. Audiences were flocking to franchises with visual spectacle, fast pacing, and clear heroes. Nemesis attempted a balance between character drama and action sequences, but failed to hit the spectacle benchmark set by contemporaries like The Lord of the Rings or Star Wars prequels. Coupled with a darker, more reflective ending, the film left many fans unsatisfied and studios reluctant to invest in another TNG outing. Thematically, Nemesis also explored ideas that undercut the franchise's core optimism. Cloning, identity, and the duality of good and evil became metaphors for moral uncertainty rather than hope. While this intellectual depth is commendable, it diverged from the TNG formula that celebrated collaboration, exploration, and the triumph of intellect over brute force. For a franchise built on optimism, ending a story with loss and ambiguity sent a subtle message. Even Starfleet heroes are not guaranteed happy endings. That message, however profound, did not translate into box office confidence. In retrospect, Nemesis feels like the necessary, if tragic, end cap to the TNG film era. It wasn't that the crew or the characters lacked appeal, they were as compelling as ever, but the tonal shift signaled a conclusion rather than a continuation. For studios, this meant rebooting with Star Trek 2009 and moving to an alternate timeline to recapture mass audiences. The TNG characters were left in a universe where the narrative stakes had been reset by death, moral ambiguity, and a heavier than usual sense of consequence. The doors to future films featuring the original ensemble were effectively closed. Ultimately, Star Trek Nemesis serves as a bittersweet capstone. Its ending reminds fans that even in the utopian vision of the 24th century, loss is inevitable, and every